Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 624. Releasing August 15 in Australian cinemas is The Blind Sea, a documentary that tells the story of professional para-surfer Matt Formston, who, despite losing his vision at the age of 5, would go on to become a world champion and Paralympian in two different sports. An inspiring and thrilling exploration of how one man's defiance in the face of adversity has led to a life of overcoming obstacles and preconceptions of what it is to live with a disability. The Blind Sea also marks the directorial debut of Daniel Fenech. I'm glad to say joins me now on the podcast. Daniel, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I know you're a very busy man. We're just talking off air. Last night you had the premiere at the Opera House. Now you're in Brizzy. You're taking the film pretty much everywhere. You've done a whole bunch of festivals as well. I know you did the Sydney Film Festival and a couple of others as well. What's the response been like now that you've been showing the film to a lot of different people and you got the general release coming up this Thursday? I'm sure it's been a very exciting time for both you and Matt and everyone else involved in the movie.
Yeah. Definitely a very exciting time for sure. Like it's one of those things when you're in the thick of it and you're making the film and you really want, the moments to land. And, there's a lot of effort, not just in telling Matt's story, but conveying his vibe. So, you
Mm.
get a chance to understand who he is and the type of person he is and spending time with his network too. So like people are really commenting on those moments. They're really feeling like we've drawn the curtain back. We've been invited into that world, and everyone's just like been really absorbed by the story, which is great.
You and Matt have been friends for quite a long time, right? When was the first time you two kind of met each other?
2016-ish. And he was actually preparing for the Rio Paralympics, but he was a cyclist at the time. So I didn't actually
Yeah.
know he surfed. And we just did some social content. And I was like, dude, man, that's like you got such a cool story. You should make a movie. And then, a few years later, parasurfing became like they started the Parasurf world titles and he switched sports because surfing's his first love and rocked up a couple of world titles. And in the meantime, I kind of progressed through my career as a director and he's like, I'm ready to tell my story. And I'm like, man, I'm ready to tell it if you trust me. And, you know, 4 or 5 years later, here we are, just like we've got this, incredible film. People are like raving over it. So, both pretty stoked.
When you first start talking about the doing Matt's story, was the big wave kind of like aspect of it around that time, or was that something that he came to afterwards? I mean, was it just looking at his kind of career at that point, or did the whole big wave surfing aspect kind of like, was that part of the whole kind of journey for Matt as a parasurfer?
Yeah. Look, Matt's always surfed bigger waves. Like the biggest he surfed was kind of in the ballpark of like 18, 20 feet. And for a blind person, like for Matt in particular, he finds bigger waves easier because it's just a bigger canvas for him to draw on when he's surfing. So smaller waves, the wave happens quite quickly, so his reaction time's a lot quicker. But on a big wave, he's got more time to do his thing because he can't actually project like with his sight where he needs to go. He's feeling the
Mm.
wave with his feet. So that's how he feels the wave, and then he can dictate. So surfing bigger waves was always going to be part of the narrative. But we were kind of focused on his world title, like parasurf career. But a series of events happened, and then the big wave became a bigger part of it. And then Mother Nature, we had some really awesome like secret breaks all along the East Coast, kind of earmarked, but like Mother Nature wasn't even playing ball properly. And those big waves, like the weather systems we needed, just didn't happen. So we didn't get those big swells. Because like winter time is when the big swells come. So like when you like the pro like when winter comes, that's when everyone charges out into the water. So but we just didn't get the big swells that we needed. And um, you know, eventually like there was no other option but Nazare. And Dylan Longbottom, who's like our big wave expert, like he knows all the breaks, he makes all the surfboards for all the big wave surfers. And he knows like he won awards in Chopu where the Olympics were just on. Like he surfed a monster barrel there. But he, chatting to his team, like Nazare was the safest option for Matt. And then I guess the rest is history.
Nazare was the safest option, but keeping in mind the chop there, the waves there were much bigger than anything Matt has ever like encountered before. and it's kind of
Yeah.
notorious, that place. And for anyone who wants to know, it's in Portugal, Nazaré. Um, so when you guys first start diving into the thought of doing Nazaré, what changes in regards to the production of the film? Because at this point, I'm sure you're just thinking you're going to do travel around the eastern seaboard of New South Wales and such.
Yeah.
Now you're going overseas, and so that comes up with another barrel of fish. When that happens, I'm sure Matt has to change his mindset into going into a out of country and doing stuff as well. But you, as a producer and a director, you're gonna have, I'm sure, have to change your kind of trajectory as well in regards to
Yeah.
where the film's going.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So Matt was preparing for the East Coast, but Matt does everything with like 110%. So he did all the breath training, and they do like their breath training is pretty hardcore. Like you're underwater and you're getting wrestled and thrown around and and pummeled and beaten up under there. So you get like the full experience of what it's like to get smashed by these big waves and ragdolled underwater. So he, at his peak, like when we were filming, his max breath hold was like 5.5, almost 6 minutes. So he was like over prepared for Australia. So when we dropped Nazare on him, instead of freaking out, he had like the biggest smile on his face ever. He was like, yeah, this is like
Mm,
when we started the film and we talked about big waves, we said, oh, look, Nazare like wasn't an option. Like we were pretty clear, we called it out, like we're not going to go to Nazare. But as Matt sort of built his capability, he was ready. And Dylan, he was, testing him. He's like, yeah, Matty's ready. From a production point of view, we had to scramble within like within a month or two to change our plans, get us over there. And I guess one of the biggest things was our post budget. We had to axe the post budget um the production. And at this stage we didn't have a distributor on board. Because like all the funding that we had for the film was sponsorship. So we never had, sort of any of the traditional means, because I'm a first-time director and I'm like, risky, right? So,
mm.
so like and all of the, the established production companies like wouldn't touch us. Like, and it's a surfing doc, it's pretty niche. It's about a blind person, it's even more niche. Like you'll never get this up. Like I got all that sort of feedback. So we just went out and did it ourselves. And then yeah, when Nazare came up, like probably the biggest thing was the post budget, and that's what led me to end up editing the film, because I ended up going, look, we'll take a big chunk out of the post budget. I'll do all the pre-edits and set it up for the editor. And then yeah, just having to like free up some funds to get us over there, hoping that we'd come back with something that we could then unlock, the rest of our funding once we got back and get, the bodies on board. So that was probably the biggest roll of the dice, but like it's the whole third act of the film. Like everyone talks about it. It's just taking this film to a whole other level. It was, it totally paid off for us.
Thing about that I take from Matt watching the movie is that there's a defiance to him. Ever since he was a kid, people have said no. I mean, the whole thing about the doctor when he was a kid, like he was 5, and the parents took him to see a doctor, and the doctor's like, he's never going to play sport, he's not going to live a proper life, all this kind of stuff. And they were just like, no, that's not going to happen. And Matt himself was like, no, not going to happen. And ever since he was a kid, I think his parents, his dad said he just kind of throws himself into life, right?
Yeah.
It seems to me though, there's a constant need for some type of fulfillment on his behalf. He did the paracycling, he won the gold, he's doing the surfing, he won championships at that, but he still wanted more. That big wave kind of thing was there as well. That kind of defiance, that kind of attitude that, nothing's going to stop me getting where I need to get to. How addictive is that for you as a filmmaker? Because I'm sure, especially as a documentarian, you're going to be facing with lots of obstacles, and when you're in that deep deep in the ocean, pardon the pun here, you can't paddle back, man. You're still in the ocean. You're going to go for it, and I'm sure with yourself, you as a person and as a filmmaker, you're going to be like, I'm going to take a little bit of the Matt energy here and say, no, we're going to go right ahead. We're going to Nazare, and we're going to sort out all the other stuff, distribution, post-production funds afterwards.
Totally. Like filmmaking's hard, right? And you can imagine like the amount of hurdles I had just at this end, and my producers had. Like it was hard. But could you imagine me saying to Matt, sorry, I can't do it, it's too hard?
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Yeah.
it doesn't. No, when I gave him my word, we're gonna make this film, and like it's my first film, like I had such a fire in me. Like this is my first chance out of all these years where I finally get my first crack at making a film, and a couple of other opportunities came and went. It's like, no, like this is going to happen. We're going to make a film. It's going to be amazing. And I'm like digging my heels in. And that's kind of part of the reason that we led us to Nazaré. It's like, well, if we're going to go big, let's go big. Like, let's look at all the big breaks around the world. We looked at Shippies, we looked at in Tassie, we looked at Jaws, we looked at Chopu in Tahiti, and we looked at Nazaré. And Nazaré was the best option for Matt, being a blind surfer. And you watch the film, you'll understand why. Like, we do spend a little bit of time there, but I guess from our perspective, the film, like Matt's defiance, I guess, like it all comes from curiosity. Like his parents
Mm.
from the beginning were like, no, no, my kid's gonna have like every opportunity that we can give them. And they kind of shielded him in the early days as a kid from a lot of that, prejudice. And so for Matt, what they kind of instilled in him was this curiosity on like what's possible, you know? So it's not so much a defiance. It's like, well, you're gonna say no, you know, and like I guess there is to a degree, but it's like, well, if you said no, like why? You know, let's break it down, let's work out how to do it. Like, and Matt's just curious to kind of work out another solution. And as a filmmaker, like I'm like that as well. So that's kind of where a lot of, you know, the synergy with Maddie and I am, because it's like, well, I was told, no, you can't make this film. You know, you're from Southwest Sydney. What do you know about surf films? You know, and you know, like, you know, sure, you've worked in ads and socials, but what do you know about features? Like, you know, like I've won awards in short form doco space. Like I know that world. I just needed an opportunity to prove myself. So, you know, it's when this opportunity came up, I was just like, Matt, I was curious, like, how do I make this possible? When everyone said no, other producers, other production companies said no, the funding bodies went, no, no, you got to pay yourself up with somebody. So I was kind of in this rock and a hard place. I need to have an experienced team behind me, but no one would touch me. So how else am I going to do it? So you always find a way. And, you know, I guess
Um,
probably want people to take away from this film as well. It's like you can always find a way.
the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you love. Yes, exactly right. I mean, I think it was Matt's dad. I was talking about how your obstacles, you go over it, you go around it, but you know, you can't just have it just stop you from going where you need to go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Speaking of getting where you need to go, when it comes to getting that surf footage, so the whole thing with Matt is that he always has a support system around him in his personal life, in his professional, you know, athletic life too. He has a safety crew. There's people around there that are watching out for him to make sure things are going right. I imagine as well that when it came to putting the crew together to get the footage that you needed in this movie, the surf footage especially, you will need a specific and right amount of people with the right attitude to get those shots. The skill and the attitude, because not only are you just getting shots of, you know, a surfer, but you're getting like a blind surfer, and that comes with its own kind of safety measures and such, right? So you're working with Chris Bland here. He's a cinematographer. He's worked with Heath Davis on all of his films. You and Heath has worked together before in a producing capacity. Heath is producing this movie. When you get with him and you start talking about how to capture the footage and how you want to make sure you get in the water, but not getting Matt's way and not getting in the way of his safety crew as well. What's that like? How much it goes into the logistics in pre-prep to make sure you can get the right stuff without being a hindrance, but also being intimate enough to get the stuff you need to get.
For sure. Yeah. Look, yeah, absolutely. Like, uh, the short answer is event coverage mode. We had to take on an event coverage type mindset, but with a cinematic eye. Um, yeah, so look, I've worked with Chris Bland for a long time, and one of the best things about working with him is you have this person who is so in tune with your story. Like he's incredibly talented as a cinematographer, beautiful work, technically the whole back end workflow, like he's a dream to work with, but he is right there in story with you. He knows story so intimately. He understands your story and how you want to tell it. So we would chat at length at the beginning about what it is that we're trying to do, but then you sort of instill it to how can you simplify it? Like don't overcook it. How do you sort of simplify it? Because when you're out there in the moment, you need to catch these moments that are genuine. You can't go back. They're not actors. You can't go back and go, can you do that again? We're just going to change angles. Can you do this? We didn't quite get it right. You have to be able to catch it. And we used a lot of observational sequences where for a couple of reasons. One of them was, chatting with Maddie about, as a blind audience member, how do you enjoy cinema? And, a
Mm.
couple of things that came up was it's very easy to get disorientated, too many characters, or you don't know where you are. And using observational sequences, you can like rely on a lot of the cues that a blind person would use in normal everyday life, like a diegetic soundscape, or letting people waffle as they talk just to get an idea of characterization and all that sort of thing. So knowing that's kind of how we approached it. A lot of the sequences that we did do, it does feel like a multi-camera setup where it's actually just Chris walking around, getting multiple angles and just being clever with the edit. How do we piece it together? How do we get cutaways? How do we get some noddies? So that way the story plays out as it needs to, but it's still got a cinematic feel to it. And then we sort of took that into the big wave approach. And obviously Matt was there, like he had a project to do. He was there to surf the waves and we were there to document that. So there was very much a case of fly on the wall, get out of their way. Let's just shoot what we can shoot. Let's catch what we catch. You get what you get. You don't get upset. And what we did is when the actual got out of the headland and into the water, we had a couple of local crew. We also brought one of our water shooters, a guy called Benny. So he sits on the back of the jet ski up close. So we've got one jet ski dedicated just to following Maddie and getting nice and close with the camera in the water housing. We had a drone overhead. But what we did for this film, which I thought was which worked so well for us, is we actually mic'd up everybody. So they all had their microphones waterproofed as they were out there. Now the range was so big, so we couldn't actually monitor the microphones. We just had to set them and hope they work. And some of those really genuine, honest moments that you can see out there with them all bonding, or like, and like you got the drone overhead, and then you're cutting to the water camera, or you've got Blandy's on land. Because you had the audio, we could stitch it all together, and that just brings you in just that little bit closer, and you feel like you're part of the team. You feel like you're in, you're experiencing this with Matt. Like on opening night, we had people clapping when Matt, first got out of the marina into the water there, because they were just with him that whole way, and that was so satisfying for us that they were that invested. That when Matt finally got out into the waves in Nazare, people were cheering him, and yeah, that was beautiful.
I think what works so well with that is that the editing really puts the stakes in place. That we know what Matt is facing here. Not only do we have the aspect of his being a blind surfer, which in itself has a certain level of stakes, but then you add the nature of the waves, and then there's like, I don't want to give away too much, but there are accidents beforehand to really show like this ocean means business, right? So when it came to the editing, it's kind of interesting to me. I know I'm watching a documentary, but in a certain way, it kind of feels like I'm watching a heist movie. You're kind of like a group of guys, they're going out into the ocean. You got this big score. You have a small amount of time to get it. It kind of leads up to that moment, and then it hits. And he gets the wave that or I should say, waves he's been looking for. That whole kind of heist movie kind of component to it, where it kind of builds up to that kind of the last kind of third act, and where it all kind of comes together. What I say, like a great plan comes together. Like, is that something that you were kind of like thinking of in a certain way when editing this movie?
Yeah, you could totally see I had fun editing this film. So, look, I'm a big action movie fan. I love those heist movies. When, like, the way that it had unfolded with those accidents, like you mentioned, it all kind of fit into like your sort of hero's journey story structure. All these
Mm.
beats just started to happen. And we're like, these things are unfolding in front of us, and we're shooting it going, I can't believe this is happening. And we're catching it, knowing where in the film it's going to fit. And then, like, when you see Maddie leave the headland, because we've got a couple of safety skis, we've got a camera ski, and we've got the drone overhead. The way that they actually, leave the headland, head towards the big waves, it's almost like a strike mission where you've got like the cavalry all fanned out and they're all going out. And I'm watching this footage, like that's just how they operate, I'm like, oh man, this is like so cinematic. It's cool. And then once we started playing with the edit, like I cut to music. Like I'm a real like I really need some sort of music bed to set the tone of the meaning of what I'm after. So I know what the scene needs to feel like, and I can't really cut until I have a piece of music that I can work with. And then I start shaping the structure of the track. And once I got the music bed down and I know, cool, I want this scene to fit like, 2 minutes, or needs to be 5 minutes, or, we need to have these moments like once I've kind of got a music bed down, it's a lot easier to cut because then all of a sudden those images make sense because I can slot them in here, slot them in here, slot them in here. So what was really cool about this film, and we actually use quite a lot of indie musicians in the like to score the soundtrack. So I have relationships with like a ton of musicians, and they all were really open and they shared their library, and it wasn't just their music, it was all their little ditties and moments and things. So I've got these really cool little moments that fit through the film, but then there was some of those really big tense sequences where we had Hayden score, Hayden from Massive Music score the film. So I actually had like cinematic references from films where that sound fit right for the vibe I was going for. And I'd cut that music up. I wouldn't use that track exactly the way it was given to me. I'd make it fit my story and then give Hayden those notes that looked at this moment when you see the lighthouse, it all has to change. We have to ramp up the tension. It goes from tense like 5% to tense like 100%. And we kind of like broke it down. And then once Hayden had those kind of clear sort of markers, that's when he kind of, like his sort of bed, that's when he cut loose, and that's when the score just went out of control, and it sounds amazing. So when you've got these images, and then Hayden's score came back, I was like, wow, this is beautiful. And I'll tweak a couple of shots here and there because music works to a certain structure, and if I need to move a shot a few frames here or there so the beats of the music all line up, like I'll do that. So and it was really nice to collaborate that way.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. And on top of that, you have the sound effects in the movie as well, which I think were simply fantastic. There's an immersive quality to the movie. I mean, I was watching it on my computer screen at home. I imagine being in a cinema, the immersive quality of the soundtrack would have been something else altogether. It's really interesting. We start the film off with kind of like this wall of sound, kind of like all these things coming from everywhere. I imagine what you're trying to capture is a perspective of Matt himself out in the ocean and all the different distractions, all the different things that are out there. How much of that soundtrack, the sound effects, came from miking people up? Did you get like natural like sounds through that miking, and then got to get a chance to kind of experiment and add those kind of those sounds that you captured like in the ocean to the score? Did you have to find other ways to kind of match sound to screen here?
Bit of both. So yeah, so as I was mentioning earlier about chatting to Matt about how he experienced film as a blind audience, sound design was a massive factor for us. And that's when I approached Massive Music and I said, look, this is the brief. I'm a no-name director, but I got a cool story and I got a cool idea. If you want to, have a punt on me. And I showed them the film and they was like, whoa. And they saw what I had, prepped up with the edit, and sound design was a big factor. So we wanted the audience with the ability, like we want to give the audience every opportunity to watch this film with the vision off and to really have a cinematic experience. And that was a big factor. So it drove a lot of the decisions with the edit. And yeah, like those montages where you have those walls of sound, like they all happen for different reasons. And I have I see reasons for them, but then people give me other, people take away other things from it, and that's kind of cool as well. That it's people are taking different things from it. That's really like exciting. But I at the Australian premiere at the Opera House yesterday, I actually had a blind audience member tell me that she took the audio description headphones off because she felt like she was getting enough information without it, and that was probably like one of the biggest compliments I've ever had. Like we spent a lot of time, even there's these moments where Matt talks about when you're out there in Nazaré, like it's not about conquering the wave, it's about being in tune with Nazaré and being part of it. And one of the things that he talks about is just how his brain picks and choose what sounds it needs. And he kind of gets into this, like he doesn't talk about the flow state or anything, but like I think it's kind of where he's going. And we try to replicate a lot of that. And even to the point where all you hear is just the subtle, gentle roar of this 50-foot wave. but you can still hear the slicing of the fiberglass through the water as he's surfing that wave. And all of a sudden you're there with Matt, this is the wave of his life. All the other waves have like, you can hear the sounds and the jet skis and you can hear the music going, but then when this wave happens and it's all stripped back and it's just that moment, everyone's there and you can hear the audience just like they're there with Matt on that wave and they know it's special. And that's kind of what's really cool about the power of sound. And then, like we recorded a ton of stuff and the sound designers have this incredible library as well. So like, between the two, it's like, hopefully you don't even know which is which. Like it just was so seamless.
At the start of the film, Matt was talking about kind of like the mission of the documentary, or what it was when you guys started. And
Yeah.
essentially he was saying that I wanted to speak to people who had a disability to say, look, you can do, if you might put your mind to stuff, there's a way to get to your goal. And he also wanted to speak to people, who don't have a disability. So you have no excuse not to go for what you have, because if I can do it, you can do it, kind of thing. When you're around Matt like that and in such, how's that changed you as a person after the few years you're with him? Because I know you've known him as a
Yeah.
friend, but when you're with him in his element and you're seeing him literally tackling giants, these avalanches of ocean crashing
Yeah.
down around him, what does that do to you as a person afterwards? Does that change you as a person, as a filmmaker?
Oh, look, it's contagious for sure. Like you get swept up in his orbit. Like, you can't not. Like when you're with somebody and anything's possible, Michael, yeah, like it's very, very cool. Like, could you imagine hanging out with people who are like, nah, don't do this and I don't feel like that, and they're just down on everything. And then you flip that on its head and you're with someone who's like, let's give it a shot. Let's try. Like, let's do this.
Yeah.
So like it is so contagious and it's one of the best things. And I'm hoping to, now that like we wrapped on production like over a year ago, but like I'm hoping to keep that momentum. I hope I keep that momentum going. Yeah, it's a very cool trait to have.
I think it's really cool. It's something you can really feel when watching the movie. I think Matt is a very inspirational guy in a lot of ways. I mean, just taking away the obvious of, I think, just his attitude towards everything, the kind of thing where like there's no kind of like obstacle big enough that can kind of stop you. I reckon that's a really awesome trait to have, and I think a lot of people can take a lot from
Yeah,
that.
especially
And for everyone
filmmakers,
listening, yeah,
especially
especially filmmakers.
filmmakers. And what we do is
Yeah.
so hard, but there's always a way, and there's always a team that you can pull in to help you and make some cool stuff.
That's exactly right. For everyone listening, August 15 in Australian cinemas. I highly encourage everyone watch this in the cinema, because it's like a really immersive journey you go on. Not only personal with Matt's story, but it's like the visual and the sound, like I was saying before, just how it all kind of comes together. It's really incredible stuff you've done here, Daniel. And I got to say thank you so much for your time. And yeah, man, when you're ready to talk, get the next one rolling, let me know. I'd love to see where you got next with your sophomore effort.
Awesome. Appreciate it. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.